Grace was an exceptionally beautiful woman, the kind that made people stop and stare. But behind her beauty was a life filled with hardship. She was born into a poor home, raised by a mother who worked tirelessly just to see her through school. Her mother struggled day and night, selling roasted fish at the village square, enduring the burning heat and suffocating smoke, all because she had only one dream: to see her daughter become a banker. The day Grace received her admission letter into the university was the happiest day of their lives. She and her mother danced in the tiny mud house, laughing and crying at the same time. "My daughter, you will be great. You will never suffer like me," her mother said, holding her tightly. Grace smiled through her tears. "Mama, I will make you proud." But little did she know that fate had something else in store for her. She got to school with high hopes and determination. She studied hard, passed all her papers, and never let distraction get in her way. Grace was disciplined, focused, and had big dreams. But then she met Oma. Oma was everything Grace was not: loud, sassy, carefree. She believed life was meant to be enjoyed, and she wasn't afraid to do whatever it takes to live comfortably. But despite their differences, they became inseparable. They laughed together, cried together, and made unforgettable memories together. After graduation, luck smiled on them, and they both got jobs at a prestigious bank as marketers. It sounded like a dream come true until reality hit. Marketing in the banking world was war. Every day, Grace and Oma roamed the streets, searching for wealthy men to convince them to open an account in their bank. But there was a catch. These men never did anything for free. "Beautiful girls like you," one of them smiled at Grace one day. "You want me to open an account? Spend the night with me first." Grace was disgusted. "Sir, I am just here to do my job." He laughed and leaned back in his chair. "Then you will fail. You marketers are all the same. You either play the game or get kicked out." And he was right. The bank didn't care how they got clients. They only cared about results. Their targets were high, and failure meant termination. Grace was suffocating. She had worked too hard to get here, yet every day felt like a battle. Meanwhile, Oma had no problem doing whatever it took to get those accounts. She went on expensive dinner dates, wore the most revealing clothes, and soon she was meeting her target with ease. "Grace, you need to wake up," Oma told her one evening. "These men won't just open accounts for you out of the kindness of their hearts. They want something in return. Just play smart." Grace shook her head. "I can't. I won't sell myself for money because I want to meet a target." Oma sighed. "Suit yourself, but don't come crying when you lose your job." As if life wasn't hard enough, tragedy struck. One afternoon, Grace's phone rang. It was a neighbor from her village. "Grace, come home now. Your mother, she can't see." Grace's heart stopped. "What? What do you mean she can't see?" "She's blind. The doctor said it's from all the smoke she's been inhaling over the years. Grace, come home quickly." The phone slipped from her hands. Her mother Blind? She rushed down home the next morning, and when she saw her mother in the hospital bed, her chest tightened. The woman who had sacrificed everything for her was now helpless, staring blankly at the ceiling. "Mama, it's me, Grace," she whispered, holding her hand, tears streaming down her mother's face. "My daughter, I cannot see. I can't see anything." Grace broke down. The doctor pulled her aside. "She needs surgery immediately," he said. "Yes, doctor. I will do anything. How much is the surgery? How much are we talking about?" The doctor sighed. 10 million naira. Grace nearly collapsed. 10 million what? Doctor, I don't have that kind of money. I understand, but the longer you wait, the slimmer her chances of ever seeing again. Grace felt like the walls were closing in. 10 million naira. Where was she supposed to get that kind of money? Back at work, her manager was already threatening to lay her off. "You have failed to meet your target for the past 3 months, Grace. One more failure and you are out. There are a lot of graduates roaming the street looking for this job. So if you cannot meet your target, you have to go off so that they can come in." Everywhere she turned, it felt like she was drowning. Then one day, everything changed. During one of her desperate marketing rounds, she met Jidenna. Jidenna was tall, handsome, and had the kind of presence that commanded attention. But beyond his looks, he was kind, something rare in the world of wealthy men. "Miss Grace, you are different," he told her after their first meeting, "and I like it." She didn't know what to think at first, but Jidenna was persistent. He wasn't just interested in business, he was interested in her. And slowly, Grace let her guard down. She fell in love, but there was one thing she couldn't bring herself to tell him: the surgery. She was terrified that if she mentioned the 10 million naira at this early stage, he would think she was only after his money. So she kept quiet and decided to hustle and make the money by herself. What she didn't know was that Jidenna wasn't just any rich man. He was the only son of Chief Maxwell Elliot, one of the wealthiest men in the country. And when Jidenna finally told his father about Grace, Chief Maxwell was overjoyed until he asked one question: "What does she do for a living, son?" "She is a marketer in a bank, father." Chief Maxwell's smile disappeared. He let out a cold laugh and shook his head. "No, son, it won't work." Jidenna frowned his face. "Why not, father?" His father leaned back and stared at him. "Because I know these marketers, son. I have seen them. I have used them. Your uncles, my business partners, every one of them has slept with every marketers like her. These women will do anything for money to meet their target, and I will not let my son marry a prostitute." Jidenna's face turned red. "Father, Grace is not like that. She is not a prostitute. She is well trained." Chief Maxwell stood up. "You're blind, son, but don't worry. I will open your eyes." He walked away, his mind already made up. If Jidenna wouldn't leave Grace willingly, then he would make sure she left. And so he came up with a plan. A plan so ruthless, so cruel, that by the time he was done, Grace would never be the same again. The following morning, Chief Maxwell called Jidenna into his study. His expression was unreadable, but his voice was firm. "Son, I have thought about it, and I have a condition," he said. "The only way I will accept Grace into this family is if she proves to me that she is different from the rest of those marketers. Jidenna's jaw tightened. Dad, this is ridiculous. Grace is not like them. Chief Maxwell leaned back in his chair. Then, you should have nothing to worry about it. Jidenna crossed his arms. And how exactly do you expect her to prove herself, father? His father smirked. I will carry out the test myself. Jidenna's eyes widened in shock. What? You want to test my own fiancé? Yes, Chief Maxwell replied coldly. With everything I have seen in the hands of these so-called marketers, I will not just take your word for it. I need to witness it myself before I believe it. Jidenna slammed his fist on the table. That's outrageous, father. I will not allow you to humiliate the woman I love. Chief Maxwell stood up slowly. Then you don't love her enough. Jidenna clenched his fist, breathing heavily. His father continued, his voice calm but laced with authority. Think about it, Jidenna. If she is truly different, then she will pass the test. And once she does, I will accept her. But if she fails, then you will see for yourself why I refuse to let you marry her. Jidenna's heart pounded. He knew his father was manipulative, but this was a new level of cruelty. He wanted to reject the idea completely, but then he thought about Grace. He trusted her with everything in him. She would never fail. With that thought, he took a deep breath and said, Fine, I will agree to this nonsense, but when Grace proves you wrong, I don't want to hear another word from you, father. Chief Maxwell smiled. Fair enough. But deep down, he was confident. He had played this game before, and he had never lost. The next morning, Chief Maxwell made a single phone call. Good morning, my name is Chief Maxwell Elliott. I want to invest 1 billion naira in your bank. The bank manager nearly fell out of his chair. 1 billion? He repeated, his voice trembling with excitement. Yes, Chief Maxwell said, but I have one condition. I want Grace to handle the account personally, no one else. The manager's eyes lit up. This was the deal of a lifetime. Without hesitation, he assured Chief Maxwell that Grace would be sent immediately. A few minutes later, Grace was called into the manager's office. She stepped in nervously, wondering why he was beaming like a man who had just won the lottery. Grace, you are one lucky girl, he said, leaning forward with a wide grin. This is the kind of deal that comes once in a lifetime. Grace sat down carefully. Sir, what deal are you talking about? The manager leaned back. Chief Maxwell Elliott wants to invest 1 billion naira in this bank. Grace's heart skipped. 1 billion? The manager continued, his voice turning serious, and he specifically requested that you handle his account. Grace blinded in shock. Me? Yes, you. I don't know what you did to impress him, but that's not important now. He folded his arms and looked at her sternly. Listen to me, Grace. This deal could change all our lives. If we secure this account, our bank will rise to a new level. And for you, this could be the breakthrough you have been praying for. Grace swallowed hard, her hand suddenly sweaty. This could be the answer to everything she had prayed for. The money for Mama's surgery, the promotion she desperately needed. Her entire future depended on this. She nodded her head. I understand, sir. I will do my best. The manager's eyes darkened. No, Grace, you don't understand. She frowned. Sir, what do you mean? He exhaled deeply. This is a do or die kind of deal. Chief Maxwell is not a man you say no to. Do whatever it takes to make him happy and secure this deal. A cold chill ran down Grace's spine. Sir, what exactly are you saying? The manager gave her a knowing look. I am saying, use your head, use your beauty. If this deal slipped through our fingers because of you, don't bother coming back to this office again. Grace's stomach twisted. She knew exactly what he meant. Still, she forced a smile. I will handle it, sir. Trust me. Later that evening, Grace arrived at an exclusive restaurant in the city. She had never been so nervous in her life. She had heard stories about Chief Maxwell, the powerful billionaire, the ruthless businessman, the man who could make or break anyone with a single decision. But nothing prepared her for the man sitting across her. He was older but still intimidatingly handsome, dressed in a perfectly tailored agbada. His aura screamed power, and the way he studied her, like a hunter seizing up his prey, made her uneasy. Grace swallowed hard and forced a smile. Good evening, sir. Chief Maxwell smiled back, but his eyes were cold. Grace, you are even more beautiful in person. She felt a lump in her throat but kept her composure. Thank you, sir. It's an honor to finally meet you, sir. He leaned forward slightly. Shall we get straight to business? Grace nodded eagerly. Of course, sir. I believe our bank can offer you the best financial service, and Chief Maxwell raised a hand, silencing her. No need for all that. Grace froze. Sir? What do you mean, sir? He laughed. I know how banking works, dear. I know what your bank can and cannot do. That's not why I asked for you. Her fingers tightened around her purse. I don't understand, sir. Chief Maxwell leaned in, his voice low and deliberate. This is not just business, Grace. It's a you rub my back and I rub yours kind of situation. A wave of nausea hit her. She had heard these words before, but hearing them from this man in particular made her skin crawl. There is something about this man that made her uneasy, but she had no idea that he was Jidenna's father. She shook her head, trying to remain calm. Sir, I assure you, our bank... Grace, he interrupted. Let's not waste our time. Her breath hitched as he reached into his pocket, pulled out a blank card and placed it on the table. 10 million naira. Her heart stopped. That's the exact amount you need for your mother's surgery, isn't it? He smiled, watching the shock on her face. Her throat went dry. How do you know? How did you know about that, sir? He ignored her question. Now, here is my offer. I will personally transfer the 10 million naira to you right now. And on top of that, I will go ahead and open the 1 billion naira account with your bank. Grace stared at him, unable to move. Chief Maxwell leaned back and crossed his leg. All you have to do is spend the night with me. The words hit her like a dagger to her chest. Silence filled the room. Chief Maxwell studied her face, amused by the horror in her eyes. Think about it, young lady. This is a small price to pay for your mother's eyesight, isn't it? Tears burned in her eyes. Sir, please, I beg you, I can't. He chuckled, shaking his head. You marketers are all the same, young lady. You played hard to get, but in the end, you all have a price. Grace stood up abruptly, her hands shaking. I am not for sale, sir. Chief Maxwell smiled. Then you are a fool. With that, he took his card from the table and slid it into his pocket. Call me when you change your mind. Then he stood up and walked away, leaving Grace frozen in shock. That night, Grace returned home in a daze. Her mind was spinning, her body trembling. When she told Oma what had happened, her best friend exploded. Are you mad? Oma screamed. Why did you say no? Grace flinched. Oma, I couldn't do it. I can't do it. Oma threw her hands in the air. Do you know what you have done? 10 million naira. Grace, 10 million. The exact amount you needed for mother's eyesight. Are you normal? Are you mad? Tears welled up in Grace's eyes. Oma, what about Jidenna? How can I betray the man I love like that? Oma grabbed her shoulders. Wake up, Grace, wake up. Love doesn't cure blindness. I have never seen real love cure blindness. Love doesn't pay hospital bills. You are this close to saving your mother and you are throwing it away. For what? For what? Morals? Grace sobbed. Oma, I can't sell my body, please. Oma shook her head in frustration. Then let your mother remain blind. The words cut through Grace's soul. Oma stepped back and sighed. You are suffering for nothing. Men will always betray you, Grace. Even Jidenna. What if you suffer for him and in the end he leaves you? Grace wiped her tears, her heart breaking into 1,000 pieces. Oma folded her arms. Let me ask you one question. If your mother never sees again, will your dignity be worth it? Grace stood there, torn between her principles and the only chance to save her mother. And for the first time, she didn't have any answer. Grace sat on her bed, her heart pounding like a drum. She had spent the whole night crying, wrestling with her conscience. How did life push her to this point? She had considered asking Jidenna for the money, but she had no idea how wealthy he was. Jidenna had always kept his financial status a secret, and he never spoke about his family. He had been used too many times by women who only saw his wealth. So this time, he wanted to be sure that Grace loved him for who he was, not for his money. And Grace had no idea that Chief Maxwell, the man who had just propositioned her, was Jidenna's father. And she sat on her bed, staring blankly at the wall. Her phone rang. It was the doctor. Miss Grace, he said gravely, we can't wait anymore. You have 3 days to pay for the surgery. If we don't operate before then, I am afraid your mother will go completely blind. Grace's fingers trembled as she held the phone. 3 days? Yes, time is running out. When the call ended, she sat frozen, staring at the floor. 3 days? If she lost this deal, if she refused Chief Maxwell's offer, it was over. Tears streamed down her face as she slowly sank on her knees. God, please help me, she whispered. She wept bitterly, her body shaking from the weight of her pain. I don't want to do this, but what choice do I have? God, please, can you even hear me? She cried and prayed until exhaustion took over and she drifted into a restless sleep. When she woke up the next morning, her decision was made. She would do it. Jidenna would never know. She reached for her phone, her fingers trembling as she dialed the number. The line rang once, twice. Then Chief Maxwell answered. Grace swallowed hard, her throat dry. I am ready, sir. A slow chuckle rumbled through the phone. I knew you would come around. She felt sick. I will send you the hotel address. Chief Maxwell continued. Come before noon. Okay, she whispered. She ended the call. Her whole body was shaking. Chief Maxwell placed his phone on the table and calmly continued eating his breakfast. Jidenna, who had been sitting across from him, nearly choked on his food. He stared at his father. Who was that? Chief Maxwell sipped his coffee before replying. Grace, of course. Jidenna's heart skipped. Grace? My Grace? His father smiled. I told you, son, they are all the same. Jidenna's stomach twisted. What are you talking about? Chief Maxwell leaned back in his chair, wiping his mouth with a napkin. She called to accept my offer. She's ready to sell herself for 10 million naira. Jidenna's entire body went cold. Liar! His voice was barely above a whisper. Chief Maxwell shrugged. Believe what you want, son, but in a few hours, she will be in my hotel room. Jidenna shot up from his seat, his hands shaking. No, Grace would never do that. Chief Maxwell let out a low laugh. Jidenna's breath came in short, shallow gasp. This cannot be happening, not His Grace. Without thinking, he grabbed his car keys and stormed out of the house. Grace stood in front of the Grand Hotel, her heart pounding in her chest. Her feet felt like lead. Her soul screamed at her to turn around. But when she thought of her mother lying in that hospital bed, blind and helpless, the pain in her chest became unbearable. She wiped a tear from her cheek and forced herself forward. At the entrance, a hotel staff member greeted her with a smile. Good morning, ma'am. How may I help you? Grace's voice trembled. I am here to see Chief Maxwell Elliot. The man nodded and gestured towards the elevator. He's expecting you, room 405. She swallowed hard. There was still time to change her mind. But then, she thought about her mother again. 3 days. She stepped into the elevator. As the doors closed, she felt like she was stepping into a nightmare. Inside room 405, Chief Maxwell sat on a plush chair, sipping a glass of wine. The door creaked open. Grace stepped in hesitantly. Her heart was slamming against her chest. Chief Maxwell smiled, setting his glass down. Good girl, I know you would make the right choice. Grace swallowed hard, forcing herself to stay calm. Can we just get this over with? Chief Maxwell chuckled. So eager? I like that, he said. He stood up and began unbuttoning his shirt. Grace shut her eyes, praying for strength. Suddenly, she took a deep breath, then fell to her knees. Please, sir, please, she pleaded, her voice shaking. All right, just forget about the 10 million naira, sir. Just sign the bank deal, please. Chief Maxwell raised an eyebrow. Oh, and why should I do that? Grace's heart pounded. She clasped her hands together, tears brimming down her eyes. I have someone in my life, sir. Someone I love so deeply, and I can't betray him. For the first time, Chief Maxwell looked surprised. He had expected her to give in, like all others. Yet, here she was, choosing integrity over desperation. He chuckled. shaking his head. Interesting, very interesting. Then his face hardened. Well, if you're not willing to do what it takes, then get up and get out. Grace swallowed hard. She stood up slowly, wiped her tears, and walked towards the door. Chief watched her in silence. As the door clicked shut, a small smile played on his lips. This one, this one is different, he said. Grace walked back to the office, her heart heavy. She had failed. The 10 million naira that could save her mother's sight, gone. The billion naira bank deal, gone. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she held them back. She had done the right thing, hadn't she? As she pushed open the office door, something strange happened. The room erupted in applause. Everyone stood, clapping and cheering at her. Grace froze. What was going on? Before she could process it, the manager rushed toward her and pulled her in a tight hug. "You made me so proud, Grace," he exclaimed, his voice filled with joy. She blinked in confusion. Sir, what is going on?" The manager pulled back and beamed at her. "Chief Maxwell just called. He sealed the deal. He said we should promote you to assistant manager immediately." Grace's mouth fell open. "But how? Why?" "He said you are one of the most well-trained and disciplined ladies he has ever met. He was testing you and you passed." The room burst into another round of cheers. Grace's knees buckled. She had to grab a chair for support. Her phone beeped. With shaky hands, she pulled it out and checked the message. 10 million naira credit alert. Her vision blurred with tears. She nearly collapsed. Taking a deep breath, she turned to the manager. "Sir, please, I need to go somewhere, please." The manager nodded with a smile. "Take all the time you need, Grace. You have made me proud." Grace practically ran back to the hotel where she had met Chief Maxwell. But when she got there, he was gone. Her heart sank. She had lost her chance to thank him. Feeling dejected, she turned to leave until she spotted something in the corner of the restaurant. Her entire body froze. Sitting at the table laughing and chatting like old friends were Jidenna and Chief Maxwell. Grace's heart dropped into her stomach. She shivered as realization hit her like a thunderbolt. Jidenna and Chief Maxwell, they knew each other. Jidenna looked up and saw her standing there, pale and shaking. He smiled warmly and waved her over. "Grace, what are you doing here?" he said, feigning ignorance. She swallowed, struggling to find her voice. I was looking for someone." Jidenna gestured at his father. Come meet my dad. I told him all about you." Her knees nearly gave way. Chief Maxwell turned to her and smiled knowingly. "I've actually met Grace before," he said smoothly. "She's one of the best trained ladies I have ever seen." Grace's breath caught in her throat. They were pretending that nothing had happened. It was a secret Jidenna and his father would take to their grave. She took a deep breath and smiled weakly at Chief Maxwell. "Thank you, sir," she whispered, with tears streaming down her face. With the money secured, Grace immediately arranged for her mother's surgery. Her mother was flown to the city and operated on. The procedure was successful. The first time her mother opened her eyes and saw her daughter, she broke into uncontrollable tears. "My Grace," she whispered, holding her daughter's face in her hands. "You have brought so much light into my darkness." Grace sobbed, hugging her mother tightly. "Mama, you can see." Jijena stood nearby, smiling proudly. He had never been more in love with her than at that moment. Chief Maxwell too watched from a distance, his usual smugness replaced by genuine admiration. He had spent years looking down on bank marketers, but this woman, his future daughter-in-law, had proven him wrong. He took it upon himself to introduce Grace to the most influential people in the city, opening doors she never dreamed possible. Grace's life changed overnight, but despite the wealth, the recognition, and the new responsibility, she remained sane, content, disciplined, and unshaken by the temptations of the world. But she had passed the greatest test of her life, and God had rewarded her beyond her imaginations. What did you learn from this beautiful story, guys? Comment on the comment section what you have learned from this story. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and comment so that other people can get to watch and enjoy this beautiful piece made from my heart. Thank you and God bless you.